welcome to KingPlayer TV. Tonight we have a special guest. I've been told by several people I need to have this young man in the guitar room. So what we do on KingPlayer TV, we like to let everybody introduce themselves. So without further ado, let everybody know who you are, young man, and let us know what you're doing in the guitar room today.
All right, I'm Ken Zuercher. I'm one of the local musicians from Toledo. I've been playing for money out in front of people since 1968. I won't qualify how great the gigs were in '68, but been doing it for a long time. I've played all kinds of music. I've been a music teacher for the last 20 years at the Toledo School for the Arts, and I'm now an amp builder. I build guitar amps. We have one here. We'll probably take a shot of it in a few minutes.
Yes, we will.
And that's my, we call it retirement hobby, because hobby usually costs you money, and this one's at least a break even, so we do that. And it's great fun. I do repairs and just trying to keep busy. I retired from teaching last June, was after 19 years at the school. Nice,
nice. So you have a wealth of knowledge. So we're going to talk about everything tonight, from guitars to amps to your experience with the music scene. So let's get started with the what's, the whens, the whys, and the hows. Okay. Let's start with what got you interested in music and why you actually chose the guitar to travel along that path.
Well, first thing, my father was a music teacher. He taught band and choir in grade schools and high schools. The last job he had in Toledo, when we moved to town here, when I was 10, he was the band and choir director at Maycomber High School before they decided not to have a vocational school anymore. Now I bet they're thinking they probably should open it back up. But there was music around the house all the time. He was more into classical music and opera. So we'd have opera full blast in the house on Saturday morning at 8 o'clock when I'd rather be sleeping. I'd hear these sopranos, howling, and the rest of the family is going, Right. But he loved great music. He was always encouraging us to play. My sisters either sing or play instruments. I have 3 sisters, no brothers, so we did that. Guitar. How did that happen? Well, I remember, one of my first things I remember musically was seeing Elvis on the Ed Sullivan Show. 1956, and my older sister and all of my cousins who lived in the area, we lived in Norwalk, Ohio at the time, just a couple hours away.
Right.
And I remember hearing all this rock and roll music, which was Elvis and Buddy Holly and Little Richard and Bill Haley and his Comets and that stuff. And I thought, well, this is great fun. And then watch American Bandstand, and people are dancing and having a good time. But what really made it happen was in 1964, in February, on the Ed Sullivan Show, was the first time I saw the Beatles on TV. And just like every other guitar player you're going to talk to from that era, I pointed to the TV and said, I want to do that. And originally, though, I wanted to play the Hammond organ. I was not really sold on guitar. I wanted to play in a band like that.
Okay.
But 2 problems with the Hammond organ. One, they're too big and heavy. They're too expensive.
Right.
And there was no way I could get one and tote it around. So I needed something portable and cheaper. And the guitar was a lot cheaper. So mail ordered one. It was a Univox. I spent most of my time repairing it because it wasn't a very good instrument. But it taught me how to fix instruments, how to line up the neck and make the wiring work, because it just fell apart right on the spot. And, so I did that until I finally joined a band, got enough money, and went and bought a Telecaster.
Gotcha. Telecasters, we talked off camera.
Yes,
that is the guitar's guitar right there.
That's right.
Right? So you mentioned your dad early on. Would you consider him one of your early influences as far
certainly.
As music goes?
However, he was not big on teaching me or having me learn the guitar or go play in a rock and roll band, because some of those rock musicians in those days, just like now, didn't have the greatest of reputations. And he was afraid I'd end up an alcoholic in the gutter someplace. And about 20 years later, after I'd been playing and I had gone to college and the whole bit, He says, you know, it probably was a good idea for you to take up the guitar.
So as you got traveling along, got yourself some experience, got out there and seen some people, was there someone locally that you looked up to music-wise, or was it just about seeing big rock stars? Tell me about that.
Almost locally. The first actual concert I saw, of all people, I saw Ted Nugent and the Amboy Dukes. Because he didn't live that far away. He'd come down to Toledo. And I was like a sophomore in high school, just starting to play. And there was a teen club on the east side called the Hullabaloo Scene. It was named after the TV show and I went to see the band. I went, wow, this is pretty amazing, and it was unbelievably loud too. So I went home, you know, half deaf, but fortunately it all came back. But I once again said, I really want to do that. But I had some people in town here that I can't say they mentored me right away, but I'd go see them and I'd pay attention. And try to do what they did. There was this band back in mid to late 60s called the Bounty Hunters. And they were the band from Start High School, which is where I went to school. And they had a guitar player named John Lipsky. He's now an engineer and he lives someplace, I think in Pennsylvania. But I'd go see him play, and he could play all the songs accurately, and he was also in the school orchestra playing string bass or something like that. So I'd talk to John, and he'd give me some hints. And then when he left town, he sold me his amplifier.
Right.
And some of the other players that would play in the clubs were like Bob Terry, who moved to California and Los Angeles in the middle of the. Bob Terry and Lothar Struff were two big name musicians in the late 60s, big club players. They're only a year or two older than me, but I was a little kid in comparison. Bob has been Paul Williams' music director for a number of years now, and made a good living out there, and Lothar plays in Paul Williams' band with him too. I had friends from my same class, but we all kind of learned together, and we would steal ideas from each other or help each other out depending on whether we were being that competitive or not.
Right. So you talked about Ted Nugent. Now, again, traveling along as far as you getting out there and playing, was there anyone, I know back then, the British invasion showed up with the Beatles at some point, and then here comes Eric Clapton, and then comes the Stones, and did you find any of those guys, as far as guitar playing goes?
Close. Yes, I listened to them all very carefully.
Yeah.
However, I'm one of the people in town here that can say honestly that I saw Jimi Hendrix live.
Oh.
Jimmy played at the University of Toledo, March 30th, I think it was the 30th, 1968. I was sophomore, got a ride over there with about a dozen friends. We saw him play. It was a life-changing event. Like, whoa, this is not what we're used to hearing. He played really well. He was a real virtuoso player, but he was also playing the amp. He was playing the effects pedals, to get different sounds and whatever. When the show was over, none of us said a word. We were like shocked. And we walked from UT over by the West Toledo Library. We just walked home. We didn't even call for rides. None of us were old enough to drive yet.
Right.
So that was again, that was almost a religious experience. Wow.
Yeah, there's a story that Pete Townsend tells about Jimi Hendrix. They invited him to come and sit in. They were in England at a little pub, and they heard about this kid that came over from the States.
Yes.
And so Pete called Eric, and Eric Clapton, and Eric said, well, yeah, let him come and sit in. We'll let him go first. So it's Eric, Pete Townsend, and Mick Jagger back in the dressing room. So Jimmy gets up there and does what Jimmy does.
Oh yeah.
And they come, and they're in the dressing room. Pete Townsend goes out and says, "Hey, I'm not going up after that guy." So Eric and Pete get in a fist fight, and Mick Jagger has to break them up because nobody wants to go after Jimi Hendrix.
I don't blame him.
So tell me, I had a question for you. Now you're a seasoned guitar player. You like being in a solo act, or are you more of a band guy?
Oh, I'm a band guy.
All right.
I've done some solo and duo. It's mainly me. Sometimes I use a looper. I actually got started on that after one of my students who you interviewed last week, I think, was Caden Chase.
Yeah.
Well, Caden's quite the expert at using the looper, and he's been encouraging me to go out and do a single or a duo and use a looper, fill in your parts, and that way you got the changes going on, you know, in the background while you're, you know, you can do that sort of thing. And I've done it a few times. It's okay, and I plan to continue that. But
sure,
my real passion is to play in a band where everything's just fitting together.
I'm a band guy myself, so I understand. I like to just be a part of the puzzle. I love that. I love that.
I've been singing more than I ever did in the past. It's all by necessity, probably, but having fun with that. I enjoy singing as much as playing now, which certainly wasn't the case 20 years ago, and or 40 years ago.
Gotcha.
And 50 years ago. But when I started, I counted them up the other day, and from 68 to now is like 51 years. How did that happen? So been playing, went to college, they didn't teach guitar. Nope.
Wow.
So I studied French horn and got what I call a band director's degree. It was music education. My dad told me, he says, you can go study music, you gotta learn to be a good player anyway. You can learn all the theory and all the stuff you need to know. He says, but I'd go get an education degree. He says, you may need a job someday. And guess what? He was right. So later on, I ended up at the Toledo School for the Arts, and went for almost the first season. It was the beginning of the second season, and I knew some of the people that were the principals and directors, and I talked them into hiring me part-time. So
nice.
That's probably another question there.
They probably are well thinking that they did that.
Well, they were going out on a limb.
So who are you, or what types of music are you listening to nowadays?
Me, I like good pop music. And you go, what? You should be past that by now. No. Good pop music, you know, started back, to me, I've been aware the whole rock and roll era.
Sure.
And I like whatever was good from any of those time periods, including right now. Probably my favorite newer band, which some of the younger people will probably laugh at me, is Maroon 5.
Yeah.
That's a good band. They know how to write songs and construct things well. I don't like everything they did, but I don't like everything anybody did, except maybe Stevie Wonder.
Right. Well, Steve,
I don't think he ever did anything that wasn't top-notch.
There's a couple of artists that you can, well, for me anyway, that I can safely say that don't write bad music. Tom Petty.
Okay.
Stevie Wonder.
Okay.
And who am I thinking? Prince is my idol, but
I'll add the third one to that.
Go ahead.
Maurice White.
Yes.
Philip Bailey, the whole Earth, Wind, and Fire.
They just don't write bad music.
They don't write bad music.
Just never have.
By any of the Earth, Wind, and Fire albums, especially all of them before or from I Am Back.
Yeah.
And they're just outstanding.
It's just no bad music.
It's probably the best band that ever existed.
Yeah. So you talked about, pop music.
Yeah.
And even in today's pop music. So what inspires you now to pick that guitar up and play? I'm talking about what music today. What inspires you to say, hey, I like that song, I'm going to play some guitar?
I've played in a couple of bands for a long period of time and missed out on some good pop music because I just wasn't in a band that was able to cover that stuff. And only the more recent bands, I've been in Hepcat Revival for almost 20 years because the band's almost 20 years old. We started in 1999. And a lot of that stuff, you can't pick up on the radio music when you're playing basically a specialty stuff.
Sure.
So I've missed out on that. And I missed out on a lot of the Tom Petty songs. So I've actually got another band going now, in addition to Hepcat Revival, and it's called the Mogan David Band. And if you go, wait a minute, there was a Mogan David band in the 90s? Yes, I was in that too, and we just restarted it.
Nice. And
playing some of those tunes, but we're picking tunes that we always wanted to play but missed them. And we're having a real good time with it, playing at Pat and Dandy's March 23rd. How's that for a plug?
Very good.
And,
you're on it tonight.
And so I'm picking tunes that We'll play anything from Steely Dan to Tom Petty to Jeff Beck, just whatever sounds like fun, to, Maroon 5. We got about 3 or 4 of them in the list.
Right.
And having fun with those. We're working specifically, make sure that we have all the singing parts, make sure that we don't leave too much stuff out, because some of those guys had larger groups and had more players than we do. We got 4. So.
Right. Give me your thoughts on the local current scene, music scene right now.
A lot of people complain about it, and I think it's unwarranted. It would be nice if there were more band places. I'll do this kind of quickly, but there was, going back history-wise, if you go to the late 60s through about the early 80s, there were 6-night-a-week gigs. You'd go out, and you know this, but if you'd go out, you'd see the same band would get a house gig, and they'd play Monday night through Saturday night. Take Sunday night off, come back. These guys who played in those bands made enough money, they'd buy a house, get married, drive a reasonably good car. It was like a real job.
Sure.
Well, the one negative thing about nowadays is it's hard to do that. It's much harder. First thing is life is much more expensive than it was in those days.
Yeah.
And secondly is that there are no house gigs that are 6 nights a week. In fact, the last one that I knew of was when Claude and Clifford played at the Murphys.
Right, the jazz guys.
Yep, jazz guys. In fact, Clifford and his partner owned the place, and Claude played there every night.
Yeah.
It was one of those you could always go down there. I think I had a bedroom in the back, so I didn't have to go home. I just could be there when the music started.
Right.
It was wonderful stuff. And Clifford's still with us and doing well. Claude passed away a few years ago, unfortunately.
Yeah, I remember coming up in the late 80s, just getting involved in the music scene, and there was places like the Holiday Inn.
Yeah.
Maybe you could go and play. There were I remember the group Touched.
Oh yeah.
They would play.
They're friends of mine.
I mean, just a lot of bands can make a healthy living playing only music.
And they did. And when I got out of I went to college. This is related to that.
Sure.
I went to college I graduated from Start in 1970, started in the next fall, because that's what we did. Wasn't expensive, didn't have to borrow any money, had a job delivering furniture and playing gigs. That was enough to pay for school, And I went to UT, graduated in 76, got a bachelor's degree, took 6 years, who's in a hurry, And when I got done with that, I'd been playing so many gigs that it was time for me to just play and not get a job as a band director someplace or a music teacher. So I joined the Holiday Inn bands. I was in 2 or 3 of those, and we put everything in a van, drive to some town somewhere. Some of my favorites is Thief River Falls, Minnesota.
Yeah.
We went there, of course, in the dead of winter. We weren't about to go there in July, of course. That would make too much sense. Also played in Calgary and Edmonton, Alberta. And it was fun trying to get the gear and us across the border.
Yeah.
But we did and got back, probably barely. Played some of these places 6 nights a week, had a wonderful time. However, at the end of the last year that I did that full-time traveling, I called that being on the road. It was hotels, a few bars, but most of the hotels, they'd give you a place to stay. Some of them would give you half price on the food at the restaurants in the hotels. And that worked out reasonably well. But at the end of the year, I had a net income for my taxes of $108. And this was 1979.
Yeah.
And I decided that I could make more money than that staying in town playing 4 nights a week, because the gigs were mostly about 1980. We were down to 4, Wednesday through Saturday,
Sure.
maybe Tuesday. The band like Touched would have the 5 or 6 night one, but I'd get the 4, have a day job, whatever, that sort of thing. Worked out just fine. But then I had a house gig there with some friends. One of them was Bob Short, who was an organist with a band that was very popular in Toledo in the early 70s. It was Mr. Entertainer.
Okay.
And the bar was on Sylvania Avenue. The guitar player owned the club. So they played there every night. Bob was an organist, a great Hammond organist and a singer. and I got to play in a band with him about 1980. And we did 4 nights a week, so I was really excited because he was one of my heroes. I'd go see these guys. They could play pop tunes exactly accurately and put their own spin on it without without diminishing the tune.
Sure.
So that was great fun.
Nice. So, a couple more questions, and then we won't keep you too much longer. But it's safe to say that if you have to go to a desert island, you're taking that telly with you?
Oh yeah, and that. Yeah.
What's the piece of music you're gonna take? We talked about some pretty heavyweights.
You mean some recorded music with me? Songs in the Key of Life.
I have said that myself. Multiple interviews.
That is, with the exception of some songs maybe stretched out a bit. Other than that, it's about the most perfect collection of music I ever heard. Even today.
Yes.
And there's a couple of Prince albums that I would put nearby, but we'll go with Stevie.
Yeah. Songs in the Key of Life is just the perfection of music.
Yeah.
That's what I call it.
That's about as high a level as it ever got.
Right.
And yes, I love Steely Dan, and because they're playing all these. All those nice jazz chords that the rest of us who were used to playing blues-based rock go, huh? What's that?
Yeah, there's something else. They were at the amphitheater, the zoo amphitheater, and I didn't go in, but you drive by, and I immediately I pulled into the parking lot
and just said,
"Listen, that's Steely Dan." I know them.
I actually was at that one.
Okay,
that was a while back. And
right,
it was a great concert.
Right. So before we let you go and play us out, tell me a little bit about that amp that you got there. I know it's off camera right now. We'll get a picture of it, but why did you start making amplifiers?
That's a good story. I'll try to make it brief also.
Yeah.
My son is a musician. He went through the Toledo School for the Arts. I was teaching there. I basically went to find a place for him to go to school, and I looked around and I go, wow, these kids seem like they're having a good time. They want to be here. And and they taught math and science. It wasn't just fun and games. And so I asked the guys who were the directors, and I said, "Are you interested in part-time teachers?" Because I've been a broadcast engineer for 25 years.
Okay.
I went and I was the chief engineer at WGTE Radio, the 3 transmitters, and I'd go record the symphony, and I'd make sure everything worked and install new gear and all that. But I had left there, and I was just working part-time for a couple of stations, and I got a job there, and my son was, doing well at the school, and I'm working there, and after he graduated, he moved to New York. He says, "I'm going to New York, I'm going to, become a big deal." Well, he's on the verge, but so, we're always on the verge of being a big deal. So he needed an amp. I sent him a Fender, and it was nothing but trouble. It was, I put him, here's a good way, by the way, if you want to ship something, and you can do it, put it on the bottom of a Greyhound bus, and have the person at the other end meet the Greyhound bus. It's cheaper than UPS or the Postal Service. And so I sent him this amp, and it was constantly causing him trouble. He says, "Dad, why don't you build an amp? You can certainly do better than this, certainly for reliability, So I basically built a Fender type amp. I took a couple of schematics together, built one with a head and a bottom cabinet, and separated the amp. I thought that was a great idea. Well, that wasn't a great idea, but building the amp was. And I sent it to him on the bus, and he goes, "Wow, that's great, Dad. Build another one and make it better." And I go, "Oh, no, I'm not done. I gotta keep doing this." So he kept bothering me until we hit on what was turned into the Red Amp. It was originally going to be the Red Amp Company, but instead it's Zuercher Amplification.
Okay.
And it's we call it an American sound. It's based on a Fender circuit, and I sat and tweaked it and adjusted it until I liked it, got a bigger, fuller sound. More headroom so that it's more meant to use pedals. Ooh, there's a pedal board down here, and it's yours as a matter of fact. And it's it's meant for all styles of music. And I started building them for other people, and I've made 31 of them so far.
31.
And I have 4 at home, so obviously somebody owns them, and I've sold most of them. My son has a couple of them.
Let's get a picture of that thing.
Okay, yeah, go for it. And
there it is.
And then one of my good friends at a local music store is Tom Lawson. who you might want to talk to sometime too. Tom is a guitar player. He plays with the Reese Daly Band. He also plays with Bafo, which is all the bands in town really want to be Bafo.
When you get Tom to come out into the guitar room, we'll be happy to have him.
Oh, I'll talk to him. I'll bet you can get him in here. But I went to see Tom. He had a store called Tumbleweed Guitars, and I played the amp for him, had him try it out. I said, "What do you think?" He says, "Nice amp." He says, "But I'm really a British amp type of guy." And I go, "What does that mean?" He says, "Oh, I don't know, Fender, or not Fender, Marshall, Vox, Laney, you name it." Well, all three of those amps have a different sound, so I had to pick one. I built myself a Vox amp and said, "Whoa, this thing's going to be nothing but trouble." So I redesigned it completely, kept the basic tone, added the headroom so you could use pedals, and then had to make it a different color, so I made that one blue. So all the blue amps, if you see one, Chris Shutter's in town has one. He uses it frequently. If it's a blue one, it's got the British type sound. He uses it with his band that does the Mountain Experience.
Okay.
So, and if it's a red one, it's got kind of an American sound, which is somewhere between a Fender and an Ampeg amp.
Nice, nice.
And,
so,
yes.
Before we let you go,
yeah,
I want you to give a couple shameless plugs.
Okay.
Your social media platforms, tell everybody where you're going to be. You got a new band.
Yep.
What's going to be coming up with the band. But last but not least, talk to people where you can get this amplification, the red amp. I'm sure people, because I heard it. Yep. Now I'm interested because it's something, and I love Fenders.
I'll loan you one anytime you want.
So talk to us about your social media platforms and then where we can get the amp from.
Okay, I have a Facebook page that's mine. I also have one for the amp company. It's just called Zuercher Amps, because typing in amplification is too many letters, And basically anything that comes up, I put that on there. Also, when I build a new one, you can find me sawing on the cabinet. We build every part of the amp. The only thing I don't do is make the chassis. I have a local guy buys this big sheet of sheet metal of 18 gauge steel. He has a laser table. He cuts it out. Doesn't have to punch the holes. He burns the holes and all the screw holes and everything, and then folds it up and then welds caps on the end. You could drive over these things with a car and it wouldn't even dent them. And then the nice thing when you do it that way, all the holes are in the right place, so that everything fits. And from an engineering standpoint, it's great. Have the chassis powder coated from a friend in Monroe, Michigan, and then my wife and I build the cabinets. I wire them up, and we build the cabinets like the old Fenders. They're made out of pine. Just go to the store, pick through hundreds of boards, take home 3. It's got to be light, it's got to be straight, it's got to have a minimum number of knots in the pine, and that sort of thing. So we do the whole thing, make the labels, relearn how to silk screen. I learned a lot of these skills. I worked at the DeArmond pickup company back in the late 70s and early 80s, and they had all these skills that I had to learn to work there as an engineer. I was able to just transfer right into build my own stuff. Except it was 30 years later, so my memory was a little foggy. The guy that owned it then is still a friend. He lives in town. I call him up and, "Steve, what happened here? Well, how did you do this?" "Oh, well, yeah, there's a trick to that."
Yeah. Well, it looks good. I love the color.
Thank you.
I'm partial to blue. And I seen that blue one.
That blue one's nice.
But I mean, they both, the colors are great. It's nice and bold.
Yep.
But it sounds to me that you mentioned the word Fender. That's what it sounds like.
It's like a fuller sounding Fender.
It sounds great.
It doesn't shout at you quite as much. And the blue one is like a Vox with a little cleaner, a little more headroom.
Okay.
But you can make that one sound kind of nasty on its own. You don't have to have a pedal to do that.
Nice.
I also have a website. It's called, actually I have a number of them, but they all point to the same thing.
Yeah.
It's either zercheramps.com or redguitaramps.com, blueguitaramps.com, and I used to have the .orgs and the others, and nobody used those, so I didn't worry about somebody setting up a phantom website. I just wanted to focus it down so
Sure.
people could find me.
Sure.
And anytime that something new comes up, I put it on the Facebook, Zuercher Amps Facebook page. If you like it, if you do a like on there, you will, anytime I put something up, it'll show up on your page, whether you like it or not.
Nice, nice. Well, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us in the guitar room.
Yeah.
Before we let Ken play us out, we need you to go to the KingPlayer TV on the YouTube channel.
Yes.
Click and like the page. The little bell you can click for the notifications, so every time there's a new episode, you'll be notified. Down in the comment section, let us know what kinds of questions you want us to ask these awesome artists. Let us know who you want to see. Tom just gave me a reference for my man to come from the Boffle Band. Hopefully we can get him in.
That'd be great.
He's a great guitar player. But anyway, let us know who you want to see, the questions you want to ask. I am at KP7 on Facebook, KingPlayer Official on Instagram, and KP71 on Twitter. The KingPlayer TV on YouTube. Episodes are coming up soon. Once again, Ken, thanks for coming out. Go ahead and play us out.
Thank you for having me here.
And we'll see you around town, I'm sure.
You bet.
Go ahead.